Welcome into another edition of Buccaneers Total Access. We are coming to you from the Hooters Owl's Nest. Casey Phillips here with Allie Marpet, and we get to talk about a division championship. We get to talk about an upcoming playoff game. It's a great day around the office here.
A lot of good energy here.
A lot of good energy.
Very exciting. No, I mean, it's awesome. I mean, when you think about like expectations going into the season and to sit where the Bucs are right now, to be, have a road to the Super Bowl is freaking unbelievable. I think there's a lot of good energy, a lot of people feeling good, a lot of positive momentum. So it's a good day to be a Bucs fan, I'd say.
It is. It's a good day. And I was thinking about this you lose Tom Brady, you got $80 million in dead cap, you're picked 31st in the league to start the season by so many people, and instead you win the division for 3 years in a row and you get a home playoff game. And it's just so interesting to see how so many people thought the cards were stacked against this team and to see where they have come out and exceeded so many of the expectations. Why do you think this team was able to ignore all that and just get to business and still, even with all that dead cap and a lot of changes, be able to be in this position?
Yeah, I think the core of the locker room has been there for a while, right? I think obviously Tom and there's other pieces around it, but the core was there, and there's a lot of good players. Talk about Mike, Levante, Chris, Vita. I mean, a lot of Antoine, a lot of guys that are playing out of their minds, and those guys have been there for a while. And the fact that you're playing with an $80 million cap hit is wild. I mean, I think that's one of the best things about football, honestly, is the level playing field, having that minimum spend, because you have competitive games week in, week out. It's not like baseball where one team's spending the salary on one player compared to an entire team.
Gross domestic product of a country, right?
Exactly. I think that's one of the beautiful things about football, and it's hard to get to an $80 million deficit. I think that usually only happens when you're so all in for a Super Bowl push, which obviously made sense to do.
Mm-hmm. And they would all say is worth it.
Also, yeah, you do it 1,000 times over. Yep. But usually what happens is clubs end up getting behind. You pay for it on the back end. Mm-hmm. The Saints with Drew Brees, there's definitely you pay for it. And the Bucs, there's just a core group of guys that have got it done. Mm-hmm. It's awesome. And I think it makes it really exciting to root for this team.
Yeah, I think it's so true. And I was thinking about, for you, looking back at when you were a player, what is it like when going into a season, outside people are not picking a team to do well? What is that like, and how do you guys try in the locker room is it you just block it out? Is it you use it? What is it like over the course of a season to have so many of the sort of doubters on the outside?
Yeah, I think it ends up being a player specific thing. So I know for me, totally irrelevant. Whatever talking head or whatever said was totally irrelevant. Now I know there are other guys that go on Twitter and screenshot the stuff that people say about them, keep their receipts, and they think about it totally differently. But so I think it's however you know yourself and however you're motivated, that's more important.
So this is the first time in team history to win 3 straight division titles. It is not an easy thing to do in this league.
Isn't
that incredible?
Unbelievable.
So talk about the significance of that to the guys in the locker room, to so many guys on this team now. It's interesting as you just look at a roster and how much turnover there is. There are a lot of guys on this roster that know nothing other than making the playoffs.
Oh my gosh.
Spoiled rotten.
Spoiled rotten.
Spoiled rotten. I figured this was your chance to soapbox that. You don't even know how hard this is.
No,
4 straight years of playoffs, 3 straight division titles. Well, what is it like?
I will say the young guys have been through it. It hasn't been the cleanest run. Yes, you've gotten where you want to go, but it's definitely had its problems, the seasons have had their ebbs and flows, so to speak.
Yeah, and I just think about, what does it mean to these guys in this locker room to know what they've been able to do in recent years and to do something that has never been done in team history even?
Yeah, so the 3 in a row has never been done.
No.
Yeah, I think that's something that stays with you. It stays with the course of your career. You'll always look back on this and think of what a special time, what a special group of guys. Yeah,
division titles are hard to come by. I think about how I think I heard that it's 19 straight years the NFC East has had a different winner. NFC East, yeah. Okay. That there haven't been 2 years in a row with the same team winning that. That division titles are hard. All these teams know each other so well, and they play each other so often, and it's just so interesting the way that works. And I thought, going in to know that it was a division opponent to close out the season to get you where you need to go, even though you can say, okay, yeah, Panthers 2-14, going into the game, that they had a rough record, they weren't looking very good, they've been through a lot of things. It's still a division opponent, and so we knew it was probably going to be a tough one. For you, looking at this game, what did you kind of expect, and what does it feel like knowing that when it's always that division opponent to close out a season, how unique those games are?
Well, I mean, the Bucs have been there to spoil other with the Saints. I mean, like we've been there, and so I just know that those division games are always like the NFL we were just talking about, right? So the level of play is always pretty consistent because of the salary cap, the way that it's set up, minimum spends, team have to spend a certain amount of money, so talent is usually evenly distributed. So in those division games, it's even more of a coin flip. And you never knew what was going to happen, even if it's a 2-win team at the end of the season. Like, they have it circled on the calendar to win that game. So you knew that it was going to be their best effort put forward. And so there's no sure things, especially with the division. So it makes it feel, even though it wasn't the prettiest of games, it makes you feel pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're talking to former Buccaneer Ali Marpet. So Baker, we knew that he was banged up going into the game, but we also knew it was going to take a force of nature to keep him off of the field. But
it's unbelievable. Like, he is playing out of his I can only imagine. Just I can see it from the outside. I mean, it looks like there's some pain. There's difficulty. Doing the things that he wants to do. But my gosh, he's just willing it, and it's awesome to see, and it makes you want to root for this team even more. I think when you have a leader on this team that's just like doing it the right way, and I can only imagine what he's feeling like today, but I'd imagine hopefully the enthusiasm and the excitement about the playoffs has got you, feeling a little bit different, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, I remember thinking, watching that game, he gets that third down run, and here he is, he came in with a rib stuff, and then you saw him limping around during the game, and then he takes off and converts that third down. And I thought, man, this is everything you want in a quarterback. Yeah. And I imagine what that does for, the offensive line, for everybody else in that game to watch him do something like that makes such an impact beyond just whatever the X's and O's are of what he's doing on the field.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a fun player. And yeah, so that third down scramble, I mean, I definitely felt like maybe like when he was slowing down, there was like you could see a little hesitation, which is like hard to see. But again, for a guy that you're playing with and a guy that you're rooting for, I think brings you like a level of enthusiasm and excitement. Like you just want to play for that guy. Like, at this point in the season, everybody's banged up. Everybody's hurt. Everybody's waking up today feeling it. Like, you're walking like a zombie, stiff. Like, that's just what it is at this point in the year. But when you have guys around you that are doing it or feeling that, but then playing at a high level and also kind of just ignoring that noise, like, it just motivates you to play at a higher level. Yeah. Like, you just want to, like, if the guy next to you is doing it, you want to do it. And you want to do it better than him. Like, so injuries, obviously, at this point in the season, impact everybody. The way the Baker's playing right now is just...
It's unreal. Yeah. So much effort, so much intensity. And I know that, 9-0 isn't exactly the, offensive powerhouse game you're hoping for at this point. But, again, he's banged up, and I just thought I wanted to hear for you. What did you see as kind of maybe what was some of the challenges offensively, especially early in the game, and knowing, starting with so many punts and struggling to get going a bit. So, how much was maybe him being a little limited? How much was other factors on the offense? What did you kind of see as to what were some of the early struggles?
I mean, it sounds like hard to do, but given the Panthers credit, like, they have a good defense. They haven't been able to click throughout the entirety of the year, obviously, but they have a talented front. And they got good corners. I mean, they have a really good defense, and it showed. I mean, obviously the things that missed opportunities both sides, and the Bucs could have done some different things offensively, I'm sure. But like, they've got a good, really good pass rush, really good stout in the run game, and their corners 1-1 are playing good ball. So it's like it's hard to put up a lot of points on them when they're playing against a division opponent like that. So. You'd like to see a more exciting game. You'd like to ideally, like, if you could have in a perfect world, you'd love the offense to, have a ton of momentum and everything's sort of clicking going into the playoffs.
Right.
But that's just not the NFL. And the Eagles sure as heck aren't doing it right now. And you just have to, at this point in the year, you just have to find ways to win. Yeah. And it's not going to be clean, and it's not going to be pretty. Yeah,
there's no such thing as style points at this point. So it's like, you know what? You win the game. It's all that matters.
Especially with injuries at this point.
Yeah.
Usually you're asking people to step up. And the Bucs are relatively healthy, which is a good place to be. Usually the teams that make these, like, playoff pushes are the healthiest. Like, who's
Right.
healthy at the end of the year?
Yeah. I was thinking that even when the offense was struggling, how big was it that they were able to hang on to the ball that entire end of the game? And for you, what do you remember about those times when you guys, you're getting the ball, you got 6 minutes left and you do not want to give it back?
Yeah, well, I think the one thing that I would say I can imagine sort of the frustration with the offense, it's like you feel like you're able to get some movement, you feel like you're able to cut guys out of gaps, and for some reason it's just the run game, for instance, like just isn't really working. And you saw towards the end of the game, it started to hit a little bit. It started to like those 2 to 3 yards runs started to pop a little bit, and they're able to possess the ball, and that's just the best feeling, right? When it starts to click, when you feel like it's there. So yeah, I think that. They were able to it felt like they were able to will that win, Mm-hmm. Like it really feel like you could feel how important it was to them that they needed to close that out. And the offense, showed up when they really needed to.
Yeah. How about the offensive line? What did you notice about their performance, both run and pass wise?
Yeah, so I think that I'd say from a pass protection standpoint, one thing that if I'm being a little critical as given the offensive line fits is some of these games, like these TTs, TEs, the defensive line stunts, passing those off. So I think that the Panthers tried to do that, try to get creative with some linebacker pressures. But really, I think when it comes to those one-on-one pass rushing matchups, which are kind of the hardest, honestly, as an offensive line, they've been playing pretty good. Now, Derek Brown as an interior rusher is probably one of the better power interior rushers. Him, Dexter Lawrence, number 1, him, number 2. And they did pretty well. I think Cody had his hands full at times, but like that's a tough ask. Like when you're throughout the entirety of a game, you're not going to win every rep. So what are your reasonable expectations going into it? I think for the most part, the offensive line played pretty well.
And then, yeah, I love this. So Chris Godwin went over 1,000 yards receiving for the 4th time in his career, which is incredible. So he broke a tie with Joey Galloway and Vincent Jackson for the second most 1,000-yard receiving seasons in franchise history, trailing only, of course, Mike Evans. 4th time in 5 years, he and Mike have both hit 1,000 in the same season, which is not easy to do.
That's got to, I mean, I don't know what other wide receiver duos are out there that have done that, but like I got to think that's up there. I mean, those guys are unbelievable what they've been able to do. So, like, they are consistency. They're the models of consistency, both of those guys. And, to have 2 1,000-yard receivers for 4 to 5 years. I mean, and also what they do to the locker room, too. Like, those guys are just high-character guys that, like, people can rally behind. I think it's so rare for the receiver position to have like these are lunch blue collar lunchbox like lunch pail kind of guys, and
got a little offensive lineman in
little
them,
offensive lineman in them. We talked to Chris about that earlier, and no, it's awesome to see for both those guys, and I'm glad that Chris was able to get it in the last game.
Yeah, absolutely, and just the role that Chris has played, he's played slot some, he's played outside some, kind of finding his way in this offensive scheme. What did you see as the role he ended up playing, and then also just the way that Mike is still playing at such a high level at this age in his career, and maybe even compared to what you would have expected at this point, just seeing the way that each of them found their individual way in this offense and what specifically they ended up bringing in this scheme?
Yeah, I think Chris is kind of our version of that Swiss Army knife a little bit offensively. You try to get him into the short game. You try to put him in the slot. You can try and run the ball with him a little bit, like in these sweep type of action, type of plays. And I think that he's done a really nice job of it. I think that when you have a player like Chris, you try to figure out ways to scheme him up because he's such a unique athlete. So I think they've done a nice job. I mean, I think Dave has utilized him well, and then Mike is the kind of guy where just cut it loose and just let him rip. Like at some point, he's going to be running downfield and he's going to be open, and as long as you can make that connection and take your shots strategically, he's going to have 1,000 yards. Like you can just hang your hat on that. And the fact that he's doing it this late is unbelievable. The truth is it's a contract year for Mike, and I think the outside looking in, usually those guys tend to play with a little bit more fire, and it is awesome to see. But I do know that even after whatever contract Mike gets, that he'll be able to continue to get 1,000 yards.
Yep, I completely agree. All right, we're going to take a quick break here on Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Hooters, the original wing joint since 1983. This is Buccaneers Radio. Welcome back into Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Hooters. We are coming to you from the Hooters Owl's Nest. Casey Phillips here with former Buccaneer Ali Marpet. Let's talk a little defense now. First of all, first shutout for the Buccaneers since 2010.
Dude, shutouts in the NFL are so hard. They, like, at some point, usually somebody lets up something.
Even just a field goal, something.
A field goal, like because an offense can have an interception, give the opposing
pick six,
team opposing team good field position. Like your punting game needs to be on point. Like everything needs to kind of work for you to pitch a shutout. And I think that the defense, they just played out of their minds. I mean, they played to their capabilities and. A couple, I think the truth is there were some lucky breaks too, like the holding, right, that brought back that touchdown, like that was extremely fortunate, and also Antoine.
Good grief. Let's talk about that play. Tell me when you saw that, what went through your mind?
Is there, so I thought about like him on the radio show, honestly, when we had him, and he's talking about, how many turnovers he wants to have in the year. Like, is there a defensive player that's had more of an impact on the game than Antoine?
Nope.
Like, he has
I think you asked that as like a hypothetical, but I think everyone out there was like, no.
So not only is he like, or talk about game-saving, like from safety, game-saving tackles, or like game-saving, whatever. Like, he has stopped, touchdown, like reversed points.
Yeah, he can count specific points that he saved.
Himself has saved. I don't think that, that's not a stat, I don't think, but like, he's got to lead. He has to lead the league in that.
And even I thought about in this game, he got the sack that pushed them back 9 yards. That then they missed the field goal, which they might not have missed. So even things like that are a little bit less direct as his forced fumble on the goal line. He is making so many plays that are directly impacting their points, and it's incredible.
It's got like it's defensive MVP like conversation, which is like, don't get me started on the Pro Bowl with him.
I was planning on getting you started. That's actually what we're here for, is to get you started on that.
Let me just say, the impact that he has had on games by turning the ball over, which is the number one indicator for winning and losing in the NFL. Like him directly making that many turnovers, stopping that many, reversing that many points, putting the quarterback in third and long position with the sacks. I mean, it's just whatever the war, the individual stat is for that is just he's got to be a consideration for defensive MVP. And then the Pro Bowl, my God.
It's unbelievable. So to think we're talking about how we really believe he deserves to be the defensive MVP.
Yes.
And yet he's not one of the top at his position in just the NFC. Is hilarious.
So yeah, Pro Bowl voting is flawed. I'm a little biased because I felt like there's some years I would have liked to be in. So obviously I'm a little upset with Pro Bowl voting.
Yep.
But yes, I think that the issue is I was just looking, like it looked like there's only one free safety for the NFC and there's two strong safeties. I don't know how they normally do it. I don't know if they split up safety, free safety or strong safety differently, if they have. Or if it's just 3 total, but it seems like a huge miss. And the thing is, he's got name recognition. He's played enough.
I think if anything, this will now give him the name recognition, that's one of the few perks of this, is the fact that he got snubbed, I think has been such a national conversation, and showing everybody the stats that even people who maybe hadn't watched the Bucs as much or hadn't followed him as much, I think now more people are involved. I almost think if they redid the voting today,
He would
get it.
There.
That it's like, this is my hope, is that we've had enough of a campaign for him this last week that this, while...
It'll never happen again.
Yes, that in the short term, we've sacrificed this Pro Bowl for years to come of like, hey, everybody, look at what he's doing, which I think is helpful. But it's crazy.
I think so sometimes, and I think fans may need to know this as well, like when it comes to player Pro Bowl voting, like so players do their voting, it's usually towards the end of the year. Like it's kind of sometimes I would say maybe not as thoughtful as it should be.
People got a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like another. I know it sounds silly, but sometimes can taken as like another like to do. And I think that when you combine that with like how fans vote, which name recognition or
their team,
exactly. I think that's when you get these sort of snubs, and it's disappointing. But I mean, he's got to be. Hopefully they make it right. I mean, he's all pro. I mean, I feel like he's got to be.
He has to be. I also wanted to hear from you. So he got his 6th sack of the season. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. That's a tough one. I had to think about that one for a little bit. Sixth sack of the season. I would love to hear from an offensive line perspective about his rushing ability and what that is like for an offensive lineman to know that you don't have to just worry about these defensive linemen in front of you, the outside linebackers over here, but one of your top potential sack getters being this safety that you never know where he's coming from.
Yeah, so I'd say the most difficult thing to think about when you're thinking about a safety coming down in the box isn't necessarily the physical component of it, but it's making sure that you, like as an offensive line, you're responsible for that guy. Because I think that in an ideal world, you can scheme up an offensive protection so that you have the 4 down and whoever they're bringing from a pressure standpoint. That's not really what's happened with Antoine. He's been able to get to, for the most part, on running back, those sort of matchups, which is a huge advantage. Antoine on a running back, like you take that 10 times out of 10. So that speaks to Todd Bowles and what he's able to do, just sort of scheme up that. Now, from the offensive line, you want to try to be able to see those pressures and be able to make those adjustments, or quarterbacks to make those adjustments. So if Antoine's coming, how do we be responsible for him so we don't have this running back matchup? But when you're thinking about that, it just like adds to a layer of like, all right, so find 31, like you talked about. We've talked about like Tom, find Ed Reed on every play or something like that. It's kind of like that. You just need to know where he's at all times, so you don't have your running back mismatch blocking Antoine.
And it can explain part of why we saw, Yaya gets another sack. Now he has 7.5 on the season, leading the team, second most of all rookies, and ties Adrian Claiborne for the second most by a rookie in team history.
Wow.
Pretty incredible stat line, right?
Yeah.
I have to imagine things like what Antoine's doing is helping other people. It's also like how we've talked about Vita always taking up these double teams, helping the other guys out there, that now you have so many different people doing things that it's freeing up other guys to start having their big time seasons. But tell me specifically for Yaya, what you've seen from him and what you feel like you've kind of watched his growth over this rookie year, knowing that he now has those kind of numbers, maybe not even getting tons of snaps early on compared to some other rookies that were drafted higher than him.
Yeah, I think that speaks to it. The fact that he's been so productive with his snaps on the field. Like early on in the year, he's not like this is the guy. He's going to be our premier pass rusher. He's going to be our sack leader. Like, we need to get him on all third down situations. I don't know what his snap count was, but it definitely wasn't, that of rookies who are projected to start day one and expected to play at a high level. So he's vastly exceeded expectations, and I think that you really just can't get him on the field enough. I mean, he's really disruptive. He has a really nice balance of power and pass rush moves. And I think he's still really raw, which is really exciting. The fact that physically he can do so many things. I think once he sort of develops a few more effective pass rush moves, he's just going to get better. And so it's good. I think that it's exciting to have a player that's that athletic, that has a ceiling as high as he does. And that's, that probably speaks to the reason he was drafted where he was, right? I mean, it wasn't a first round pick, but he has such a high ceiling. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're talking to former Buccaneer Ali Marpet. So now we talked about this. These last couple games haven't necessarily been the offense's dream scenario of how they've wanted things to go, after especially having 4 games in a row that we did see so much more of an explosion of the offense, and it looked like what they, I'm sure, had designed it to be and wanted it to be. What have you seen as, in general, just how Canales has evolved as a coordinator over the course of the season, how the offense has evolved over the season, and what are the things of why these games, it's like, yes, this is it. Some of these other games, not so much. What have you seen as the indicators there?
Yeah, I think there's a really good balance of staying true to sort of your philosophical principles, which is run the ball, set it up with some play action, get these nakeds and these boots where you can get Baker on the run a little bit, and then also highlighting personnel. So how do we get Rashad out in space? You know, we were talking earlier about Chris, and how do we use him as sort of a Swiss Army knife? So I think balancing like your core, like principles of what your offensive identity is, but then also highlighting what the type of players you have and giving them opportunities to do what they do well. And I think that towards the end of the year, there seems like when the offense is really clicking, they strike that balance of letting players play at the highest level, but also do what they want to do within what the Bucs do, right? What that philosophy is, you know, run the ball and all that other stuff.
Yeah. And how about Baker's biggest strengths this year? Where have you seen with this offensive scheme and with Canales and Baker what they've been able to kind of build, and what Baker specifically brings from more of like an X's and O's? We talked about like his leadership, his gutsiness, but like kind of his X's and O's part.
Well, so I will say that one of the Baker's strengths as a player is just like he is a gamer. So like I know that obviously, so he can make the throws, he can do the things that you ask him to do. I think the truth is not turning the ball over is massive, and he's done a really nice job of that. So from just to talk about a game management standpoint, he's been fantastic. And then when you don't think of him necessarily as being that guy who's a third and long, like kind of just get it done. But the truth is, like, he's a gamer. It's like kind of like Ryan Fitzpatrick-esque, where it's just like, what are you thinking here? Like, you shouldn't be doing this. And he gets a first down, and he keeps the chains moving, keeps the offense rolling. And so I do think that he's been able to manage the game successfully, but he's also been able to be explosive like those other quarterbacks that people tend to think of as their, you know, like the Lamar Jacksons or those kinds of quarterbacks that can just, like, you can't really game plan for.
And then how about Rachaad White as RB1 this year, and how much he's been asked to do in this offense in terms of, first of all, it was so sad, 10 yards short of 1,000 yards rushing. It was just right there.
Oh, gosh.
He almost got it on that final drive as they were just kind of trying to hang on to the ball and run and everything. But 10 yards short of 1,000 yards rushing, and then he's been asked to do so much in the pass game as well. What has he added to this offense, and what have you seen about his progression in terms of, as we talked about, the offense really stayed dedicated to running the ball throughout the year, even when it wasn't clicking as much early on?
Yeah, so I think that the fact that the Bucs have gotten so much flack about the run game, but you have basically an 1,000-yard rusher, I think speaks to the fact that they really, one, stayed committed, but then also it was probably more effective than people were giving credit for. And then also we talked about earlier how when you have those sort of hybrid players and, you know, highlighting their strengths, like what Rashad was able to do from a passing game standpoint. Like it's hard to scheme up as a defensive coordinator, like how do you think about, you know, a running back who's, you know, lined up as sort of like a wide out, like how do you really, like, you kind of have this wide, like we tend to put people in boxes, right? He's a running back, but he can kind of be a receiver a little bit as effective. And so I think that not only from out of the backfield from checkdowns, but also lined up as a slot or whatever, like he really does add a lot to this offense, and that's hard to sort of quantify as well.
All right, we're going to take another quick break here on Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Hooters, the original wing joint since 1983. This is Buccaneers Radio. Welcome back into Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Hooters. We are here from the Hooters Owl's Nest with former Buccaneer Ali Marpet. Let's dive into this offensive line a little bit. Your sweet spot, your guys, you know, tell me as we look back. Oh, wait, yeah, you look like you're about to.
No, I'm just very excited that we get to talk O-line.
I know, of course you are. It's your favorite thing. Yeah. So let's break down. Obviously, this was a huge storyline going into this year, right? I mean, it was such a reorganized group. It was new people, it was new positions. Hainsey's the only guy in the same spot as the year before, and both of those times that wasn't necessarily the original plan. So of all the groups to have that kind of a situation, the one that chemistry is the most important, it's a pretty wild scenario. And then throw in, oh, there's a new coordinator and a new quarterback.
Yeah.
It's fine, we're all fine. Yeah. So tell me, knowing all of that, your expectations for the line this year, you know, your concerns of what that would mean, and then watching how they've handled it and progressed throughout the season.
Good. So obviously, I want to answer this. I'm biased. I think that offensive line play has a seriously strong predictor of team success and making playoffs. In my humble opinion, usually the teams that make a run can hang their hat on the O-line, D-line. Now, that's it's not really backed up by, I don't have stats to back it up.
It's just the intuition.
That's my football intuition.
Yes.
And I do think that this offensive line has really exceeded my expectations of what they're going to do this year, especially when you talk about guys doing different things, asked to play different positions. And they're one of the better ones, honestly, in the NFL. They really have played high level football. Luke, I can start from right to left.
Yeah, there you go.
But like Luke, it's probably to his own admission would say that he underperformed at left guard last year. And it's a lot as a rookie to come in and expect to start to play. And often teams have that expectation of first or second round picks, but sometimes it takes a little while to figure out how to play football. And I think that Luke has started to figure it out. And going from guard to tackle, from zero to play left guard last year to right tackle, that's like a huge switch. I trust Luke. I think he's a great player. I think he does it the right way. But like my own perspective, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. I was extremely skeptical. And I know that it was almost done out of necessity, but sometimes that trial by fire just works. And he figured it out, it clicked. Obviously, there's a ton of room to get better. He's strong as heck, and he's held up really well. But I know he'll just continue to get better. Cody, again, a rookie coming in, who you have expectations to start. Tough to do. Mm-hmm. He's learned. He's gotten significantly better. And again, we've talked about some other young guys in this team where there really is a lot of upside. Like that's what you're going to have if you're not drafting a first round pick, right? Usually these second, third, fourth round guys, they're usually missing some aspect of their game. That's why they're getting drafted where they are. Cody, I think, has some upside from a power standpoint. Once he puts on a little bit more weight, be able to move people a little bit better. I think he's going to become a really good football player. But from a baseline standpoint, he's exceeded expectations. And then Haynes, he wasn't even expected to start, right? With Jensen not knowing what Jensen's status was going to be. But I think if you asked Haynes, he was, in his mind, like he's ready to go at all times. And he is we had him on the show, such a cerebral guy. And that's such an important thing to have as a center, sort of anchoring that offensive line. So we'll see what happens with him. But he could also, if he needed to play another position, could totally do it. And then you have Matt, who came in expected to start and battled some injuries, and he played well as sort of that expected to start kind of guy. And then Aaron Stinney came in, and this is a guy that's sometimes in the practice squad. Like he's established himself as in my opinion, a starter. Like he's a starter in the NFL, and I think that going into it, most people think of him as a swing guy or a backup, but he really has played well enough to be a consistent starter in the NFL. And he's done well in pass pro too, which is like one of the harder things to succeed at is those one-on-one pass pros, and he's really done nice. And then Tristan, my goodness, like you started off, switching from one side to the other. You don't expect that he's going to do as well as he does, and he just, he talked another about a Pro Bowl snub. I think he's an alternate, right? But again, he is that guy. He is your anchor of a tackle. Like you almost don't realize how good it is until it's gone, type of thing, because he's able to bring so much security and consistency to that position.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. We're talking to former Buccaneer Ali Marpet. Overall, looking now at the defensive line, watching Vita and Kalijah Kancey play next to each other, that was the interesting thing when Kalijah got drafted, and thinking about what would this look like next to each other, knowing, Vita's your guy that run stopper, that is just his absolute specialty, even though he's, of course, been one of the top sack getters recently too. And then thinking, well, Kalijah's incredible in the pass game, but how's he going to be in the run game? That those were kind of the ideas that each one had their specialty. What is that going to look like? Who can you play on how many different snaps? It feels like Kalijah has really exceeded expectations in terms of his ability in the run game despite his size. And then, of course, Vita's still getting a bunch of sacks. How do you see them influencing each other, helping each other, and then just what those two in an interior is like for an offensive line?
Yeah, so I think that, Kalijah starting off with injury earlier on in the season. I think it's tough as a rookie, right? Because those reps early on mean a lot. And so maybe a little bit slower start than he would have liked. But again, the talent piece is there, and he can effectively rush the passer. So given that opportunity when he's healthy, it was going to show up. Both of those guys are a nightmare. I mean, in the best way.
Yeah.
So it's like when you have two interior rushers, pass rushers, because the truth is Vita, well, he is that run stopper kind of guy. He's
incredible.
Really one of the better interior pass rushers.
Was leading the team in sacks for quite a while until Yaya came flying in there.
That's what I'm saying. So like he really can again, when we think about putting players in boxes and we sort of like, he is not a run stopper. He's a D tackle that is just a good football player, and he can do so as a pass rusher. And when you have two guys, it really helps you out because when you think about you really have three offensive linemen for two D tackles if they're not bringing pressure for the most part. That's like you find out where your double team's going to be based on protection, based on potential blitzers or things like that, who's sort of the most dangerous on the back end, the linebackers or safeties. And so at some point, either Vita or Kalijah are going to be one-on-one. And like, if you do that enough, they're going to get their opportunities. They're going to get their sacks. It's just like, it's a matter of time.
Yep.
So it's very exciting. And then also what Todd Bowles is able to do, being able to run these games and schemes and kind of has offensive thinking, really helps. It's going to help both of their play. But my gosh, it is, again, playoff football. D-lines, O-lines matter. Vita and Kalijah playing really good ball. I think that, and they're going against a good offensive lineman in the Eagles. I think that it's going to be a great matchup.
What do you remember about when you first went up against Vita? You'd been here, 2 or 3 years at that point when you came in?
I was really, gosh. I mean, he is so strong. He is so big. It's hard to sort of like conceptualize. Like, I'd played at that point Vince Wilfork, and like, so that's just a big. He was at that point. He was towards the end of his career. He was mostly just a run stopper, big body, hard to move.
Yeah.
Like Vita had that, but then also had this like quickness and surge, and just like something I hadn't really played against.
Yeah.
Fortunately, as a rookie, for me, Vito's still figuring out how to play football. Like, and this is gonna sound critical, but like he was so physical, right? And so once he learned how to actually effectively rush the passer or understand offenses and defenses a little bit better, I knew he was gonna be incredible, which he is.
But thankfully, you caught him early on before that.
Exactly. I was able to catch him early enough so I could sort of game it up a little bit, where like I could just
give you a fighting chance.
Yeah, and here's the truth is, it was mostly just like he was a train on a track. Like early on, like you're not stopping him. You just have to gently try to direct him into like a different direction,
a different track. Throw that lever. And,
exactly. just push him a little bit, that momentum elsewhere. So that was my best attempt at blocking Vita.
That's pretty funny. How about it's been so nice seeing. We've talked now about Antoine and all of his sacks, and Vita and his sacks, and Kalijah and his sacks, but none of those are the traditional who gets all the sacks. Your outside linebackers are where you tend to expect a lot of that to come from. And we've got Yaya, who has surged in there. How about the rest of the outside linebacker group? Watching Shaq come back from injury, and some of these other guys that have been in here, and we saw Joe Tryon get that incredible play. We hadn't even talked about that from the game of his forced fumble sack in the game in such a crucial moment. What have you seen from that position group, and how to maybe try to get a little bit more production out of them going into the playoffs? Yeah,
well, the thing is that they really, in my mind, have played the run pretty well. So like it's difficult, I think, to have true guys that can play the run and play the pass as well as you'd really hope for. I think that what you're going to have to do is get creative with some stunts and pressures and different looks that we've seen, like Joe kind of loop in. We talked about this overload front before, where you have three guys onto one side of the center, and then one guy on the other side, kind of one-on-one. And you can always run these stunts or these games out of it. And you have these quicker, like Joe looping inside, getting a matchup on an interior rusher where he can, kind of showcase his quickness and those kinds of things. I think just that sort of change-up can, might be nice for those guys, and they also have shown up to be pretty effective for them.
Interesting. And then Levante, I feel like the same way we've talked about Mike, that each of them are kind of these mirror images of each other on either side of like, man, you are playing at a level you just shouldn't be playing at, it feels like, at this age and how long you've been doing it. Levante, what have you seen from him? What do you remember about even just playing alongside of him, what it was like to have him as a vet to this locker room, and then now watching all these years later, he is still doing it at this level?
Yeah, I think the reason that the Bucs are in the position that they are is because they have the veteran talent that is playing exceeding my expectations, and then they also have these young guys that are showing up and showing these flashes of really good football. And I think with Levante, like, he is, again, one of those guys who's played out of his mind. It's awesome. I remember playing against him, like, there were certain plays, like these tosses, where it's like, I knew it was going to be a tackle for a loss. Like, we were talking about, this is in training camp. Like, there's a play I really love. It's like, it's fantastic. I get to go out in space, pull around. It's an outside zone type thing.
You get to crush a DB.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's a pin
what's
and
not to
pull
like?
type thing. Every single time. He's tackling and I've seen other teams do it against other teams, and it's a fantastic play. But he just has such a good read on it.
It's a great play unless you're playing Levante.
Unless you're playing Levante David. Like, when you have players that are great, and where you like this certain particular play, but you can't run it because this dude, like, that changes the flow of the game.
Yeah.
And that's those are some of the other intangibles or the other ways that Levante may impact the game.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And earlier you brought up some of the stuff that Coach Bowles was scheming up. Tell me, for you, what it's been like to watch him be a head coach and the defensive coordinator, and what do you remember even about just going against his defense in training camp and practices, and what he uniquely brings?
I mean, my goodness, it is like, if as a center, as a young center, you're just like swimming. You're like, where are they coming from? Also, I think sometimes it's possible that they're a little bit unsound, I would say, in a kind of a good way. Because, like, in my mind, I've said this before, but like, you can only do so much, like, as from a defense. Like, if this guy is blitzing, somebody else has to sort of cover that space, right? We need all spaces sort of covered.
Yeah.
Just as a conceptual framework. Sometimes Todd will do some things, Coach Bowles will do some things that may not be so sound.
They may not be what you would have said is the traditional way to do it.
Exactly. And you're kind of like, you can't do that. Like, if
it
this
breaks
guy,
the rules.
It breaks the rules. If this guy's coming, or if this, for instance, if the safety's pressed over, the safety has to be way deeper if he's going to be covering that area of the field. Like, he can't be this low if he's also going to be running back and covering this space. And so, like, I think that makes it really challenging when you have, like, all these rule breakers. Because, like, from an offensive line, like, if you have a safety at 15 yards deep and he's capping the corners, so it looks like a corner could come from a pressure standpoint, and then they totally rotate and do something totally different. It's just, it sucks to game plan for.
So basically, it's like, by breaking all the rules, you are keeping the offense from being able to make the correct assumptions that they would normally make, that you're kind of causing them to be back on their heels because they don't get to follow their normal rules either.
You need these parameters, right, for what defenses can do, because you need to have answers to things. And with Todd,
there's no answers.
There's no answers. Yeah.
That's great. All right, we're going to take one more break here. We have another segment coming up on Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Hooters, the original wing joint since 1983. We're going to break down this upcoming Eagles matchup. This is Buccaneers Radio. Welcome back into Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Hooters, the original wing joint since 1983. We're coming to you from the Hooters Owl's Nest. Casey Phillips here with former Buccaneer Allie Marpet. We got to talk about this upcoming game against the Eagles. First, I figured it's perfect to talk to you about the tush push. This has been the storyline of the Eagles all year. Tell me, as an offensive lineman, Your thoughts on the play and why they're so good at it and why it doesn't seem to be run by more people.
Okay. Well, so I don't know all the trade secrets. I can just say what I've seen sort of outside looking in. I saw at some point that they had a rugby coach come in and sort of really, it's basically a scrum, right? So it's like getting as low as you possibly can and then having people behind you push, which seems to work.
Yep.
I will say what they're able to do well is the pad level that they sort of almost like crawl on all fours and sort of dig out and that seems to work. And then also when you have some guys behind that can generate some force pushing it, ends up helping. But I'll also say that one thing that Kelsey seems to do, the center, I feel like every time he lines up on the ball, he sort of nudges it forward a little bit. He's gotten caught, and it's nice to see that he's gotten caught. But the truth is, I feel like that's been happening for years.
Yeah.
So I think it's been 13 or 14 years.
Yeah.
So he's just got caught this year.
Yeah.
So
it's like what Jason Witten always said of like, I hold every play. It's just whether or not I get caught.
Exactly. So it's played out more often for them. That's worked out more often for them than not. But yes. And then I also think we're getting to a point where we're seeing variations of it, right? So you can get, you have to go all in to protect the tush push. Like you really do have to pad level sort of dive down to the ground if you have any sort of semblance of stopping it. So we're going to start to see more and more variations of, a pass coming out of it or the sweeps around or doing something different as teams can be more effective about stopping it.
And it's interesting, we always talk about how important it is of where teams are at this point in the season, right? That how are you playing now? Are you at your best? Are you, because suddenly now that you're into the playoffs and none of the other games matter, it's just at this moment, how are you playing? And the Eagles, they start 10-1, and then now they've been 1-5 in these last 6 games. What is that like when you feel like you're facing a team like that? Like, what do you notice about why maybe this team is in this situation, and then where the Bucs are at also of like, where would you consider them in terms of playing their best ball, and how this therefore could be a different matchup than the first time they played each other?
Yeah, I think that every year you see a playoff team make a run that you wouldn't necessarily expect to have that type of run, because of their record going into it. And I think that while momentum sort of, I guess, feels like it matters, I really think that it's more of a luxury. Like, I do think that you don't need it to have success. I think that while the Eagles, I think, are struggling recently, they're still such a talented team. And we were saying earlier, this is such a week-to-week league, especially when you're talking about playoff teams, right? So now we're talking about teams that have proven themselves, that are effective, that it is even more of a coin flip of momentum and ability. So we'll see what ends up happening. I do think that the Eagles, while they're missing a little bit of momentum and maybe they're a little bit banged up, like when you just look at their roster and their individual players, they're such a talented group, and they usually play the Bucs really well, at least recently. So,
and I was thinking about, we're talking to former Buccaneer Alan Marpet. So Super Bowl year, all the playoff games were rematches from the regular season. What are some of the pros and cons of when that happens? That the playoff game is someone you've already faced, and maybe even in this situation, someone you've already lost to. How does that affect how you game plan, how you approach it, how you feel about it?
Yeah, so I think that we've talked about this earlier at some point with division opponents, but it's sort of that where that creativity sort of becomes more relevant. Like, you have these looks, you have these base looks as an offense or as a defense, and it's like, where can we add these wrinkles? Where can we add these one-ies that sort of we're going to get us that explosive, or get us that third down, or just do something that can make us have that sort of edge, or play a little bit faster. So when you've seen a team before, it's really about how you can get creative in that game. And then when you're talking about those one-on-one matchups as a player, how do I sort of play this game within a game, and how do I, think about taking away or highlighting my own strengths, or taking away their strengths as a defender, as an offensive player. So you really have to do things a little bit different, add these little wrinkles to your game, and often they're pretty subtle, but they make a big difference.
So having watched the Bucs all year and also knowing what the playoffs are like, what are the things that you would say for this game and however many playoff games they end up playing? What are the keys to it, regardless even of who you're playing or thinking specifically about the Eagles, whichever way you want to take it, of the keys for the Bucs to be able to get wins in the playoffs?
Yeah, so I think nothing really changes as far as the formula. Really, it's taking care of the ball and turning turnovers. Like really, that's at the end of the day. I think the Bucs are good enough to make a run if they don't shoot themselves in their foot, and if they're able to do the things that they've proven to do defensively, which is turn the ball over. You just let Antoine go, just like let it rip, and he'll make something happen.
Yeah.
The Bucs will have success. I mean, they are a talented group, and they've proven themselves to do some pretty impressive things.
So what I'm hearing is that the key to the game is Antoine Winfield Jr. That's what I'm hearing at this point.
Yeah, no, it really is. It is turnovers, and that usually dictates how a game will play out.
And then finally, if the offense doesn't turn the ball over, other than that, what would you say is the biggest thing that you would want to see, just knowing what they've been trying to do?
Yeah, I think that getting creative in the run game. I think that mixing in these sort of shorter, intermediate passes or sweeps or things like that, some throwbacks, things that are a little bit different than just running downhill on a really talented defensive line. I think it will allow the Bucs to have a little bit of success. You get add these wrinkles, so to speak.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here. Thank you, as always, Allie, for your awesome insight. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you guys for joining us here on Buccaneers Total Access, brought to you by Hooters, the original wing joint since 1983. This is Buccaneers Radio.